Hello, this is Mike Felker, and welcome to the JW Review. This week we're going to be doing something very, very different, something I don't think I've ever done before. We're going to be looking at this confidential reference manual for 2022, and it's titled Jehovah's Witnesses and Disfellowshipping. This is not, as far as I know, a manual or material that is released to the general public. It's not a manual that's even being released to Jehovah's Witnesses, by and large. No, this is something that is prepared by Jehovah's Witnesses for meetings with government officials and academics. And I'm sure a lot of you in my audience here already know about this. You've probably obtained it. If you want a copy, this is not something I can link to publicly. However, if you want your own copy, the whole thing is 837 pages long. You can just contact me privately, and I'd be happy to send you a PDF of this document. But you could, if you want to Google this title, Jehovah's Witnesses and Disfellowshipping Reference Manual 2022, I know there's a number of forums where people have posted a download of this, so you could probably find it pretty easily and download it for yourself. But if you want it, aside from that, you can contact me, and I'd be happy to send it over to you. So this is a very, very important document. I'm really glad that this did get leaked, and several of you let me know about this. So thank you very much for letting me know about it. Very, very important manual. Like I said, this is for mainly government officials, court cases, and things like that. And this is just a document I've not read through all the way. I probably will never read through all 837 pages. A lot of it has... the part I'm going to review actually are just the first several parts. The introduction and the view of Jehovah's Witnesses. The comments by academics, I went through a little bit of that, some of the ones that piqued my interest. There's some stuff about court decisions here, and that's why this document, it sounds like it was really made, was because of a lot of these court cases where they need to have this information to present in courts to defend their policies. So a lot of interesting stuff here. I bet there's some things that I would really like to know about, but I just don't have time to read through this whole manual. So if any of you catch anything that's very, very noteworthy, please bring it to my attention so maybe I can discuss it on this podcast. So just in the way of a background, I'm going to link to it in the show notes or the video description. But I did a video or a whole podcast. I think it's just titled Jehovah's Witnesses and Disfellowshipping, but I'm going to link that podcast in the show notes. And that's where I go through an entire Watchtower article, I think from 2006, dealing with all the core tenets of not only disfellowshipping, but with shunning and looking at all the key scriptures and whatnot. And we will do a little bit of that here. But since I've already done that in the past, I don't want to rehash all of that. And there's a lot of material here to go over, and I don't want it to take up too much time. So what I want to do is go through the introduction. But before we do that, let me look at the most important text here. Matthew chapter 18. And this is the text that's not even really discussed in the introduction, when it really should be. I mean, if you're dealing with the topic of disfellowshipping or excommunication, you need to deal with this text. I mean, there's no more important text, because this text is really just dealing with the steps, the exact steps that you take when you are left with the decision to excommunicate someone. So let's just go ahead and read it here. This is Jesus speaking. It says in Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, "Now if your brother sins, go and show him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as the Gentile and the tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." So the key here is to see that there's nothing here about judicial committees where you only have the elders and the person being accused. Okay, there's nothing about that, and also there's nothing here about elders. Okay, this is really just about the rank and file. Taking things into their own hands, first by themselves, and then bringing more witnesses. And those witnesses could be an elder, but they don't have to be. And then you have the whole church involved, right? So you've got the whole church involved in this process. Right? You have a very transparent and open process. Now, this may be an incredibly awkward thing to do. This is not something that you just see happening all the time in regular society. So this may seem pretty awkward to be getting together with a big group of people and talking about this accused person before you. But it is the words of Jesus, and this is what Jesus is telling us how to go about this type of procedure. But notice, it doesn't just go straight to the really, really awkward part. It starts out with you going by yourself, and then you taking more witnesses. So you go through a whole process before it gets to the very, very, very uncomfortable and awkward and really, truly sad part of the whole process. And then you notice here that let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. So that doesn't mean to shun them, by the way. It's not like the Jews in that day were best buddies with the Gentiles and the tax collectors, but they weren't shunning them. They weren't best friends, but they also weren't shunning them either. I mean, especially in the days of Jesus, the Jews and the Romans were having to get along because the Jews were under Roman rulership at the time. So they had to interact. They had to get along. Again, they weren't being best buds or anything, but they were getting along. So very, very important passage. But you'll notice that this passage is just not really discussed in this article. Now, if you do a search in this whole entire document, I'll show you what I'm doing here. So I'm just typing in Matthew 18, and there are a couple of instances, and we are going to go over this one. This particular one on page 12 is very, very interesting. But then you'll find some other instances, and really these are just in examples in court cases, right? The other examples here. So they're citing them in court cases. You can see me browse through page 308, page 325. So if you get a chance to go through this document, I haven't done this yet, but I'd encourage you to go through and look through these different cases to where they discuss Matthew chapter 18 and what exactly they're talking about in these instances. So not going to go through all those here, but maybe if I have time, I'll do that in another session if there's something interesting to note. So let's go ahead and get into this. And I could have highlighted just about this whole article. This article I really feel like is quite deceptive in a lot of ways. It's just not telling you the full story. And it's a shame. So one thing I'm here to do is to try to give you as full of a picture of the reality of what happens in the Jehovah's Witness arrangement. Okay, I mean, especially if you're one of faithful Jehovah's Witnesses and you're on here. I don't know why you're on here watching me. I'm glad you are. Maybe you're curious as to what I have to say. Maybe you're watching this to try to refute what I have to say. But regardless, I hope you listen to this very, very carefully, and most importantly, that you really consider the scriptures and whether what they're saying here, what the Watchtower is saying here, is being compliant with what the scriptures actually do teach. All right, and if you are a faithful Jehovah's Witness, you should ask yourself, why isn't this manual available to not just the general public, but just to any Jehovah's Witness who wants to have a manual like this? Why isn't there this transparency? Why keep this document confidential? What reasons do they have for doing this? I mean, for the Elders Manual, you have things like that. Isn't it important for you to have transparency about what this organization is doing, how involved they are in the courts? Isn't that something that you should know about? Especially if you're interested in knowing about it. What do they have to hide? Okay, so let's get into this. So the opening comments. Jehovah's Witnesses respect the right of every individual to decide what religious beliefs he or she may have, if any. Okay, for the most part, true. They respect every individual to have the right to decide what religious beliefs he or she may have. So, in a sense, that's true. However, if you are a faithful Jehovah's Witness, you're allowed to believe what you want. But what's being held over your head? Well, really, you're being held hostage in a sense to losing all of your Jehovah's Witness friends and family to be shunned the rest of your life if you abandon your religious beliefs. So, that first sentence is true, but it's not the full story. Similarly, each individual has a right. So this is the thing with this language, like what you have a right to do and what not to do. And this is not... The whole argument here is not about rights. That's not my argument, and that's most people who have arguments against the policies. It's not really so much about what right you have to do. And for the sake of argument, let's just say for the sake of arguments, Jehovah's Witnesses have the right to disfellowship and shun people. They have the right. I mean, as a human in a free society, generally free. I mean, especially if you live here in the United States and in a lot of other Western countries, you have a right as to who you speak to and who you don't speak to. You have a right to do that. Okay, so it's really not about rights. Okay, that's not how I see it anyway, and we'll talk about that more as we go. So, similarly, each individual has a right to change his religion should he or she decide to do so. We do not force our beliefs on anyone. They don't force their beliefs on anyone. The decision to be baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses is entirely voluntary, conditional on the person meeting the scriptural requirements. So you're free to believe what you want. All of this is voluntary, and no one's forcing their beliefs on anyone. However, if you decide not to believe some of these things anymore, if you start to doubt, right? If you start to doubt or really question the organization, you could be shunned the rest of your life and never spoken to again by your Jehovah's Witness friends and family. And that's where they don't mention this in this context. So we'll say all these things like, it's all voluntary, we're not forcing anyone and whatnot. And all of this just sounds good. And it sounds like, this is what basically any Christian denomination would teach for the most part, that believing is voluntary. And if you want to leave, that's voluntary, but they're not mentioning here the shunning. We believe that people should be free to acquire knowledge so that they may make an informed choice. Free to acquire knowledge. Is that really true? Well, no, because the Watchtower has a certain policy in terms of what information you can view and not view. They do. I mean, look at what they said about so-called apostate literature, right? What do they say about that? And what happens if they catch you looking at that? So what if you want to make an informed decision about the Jehovah's Witness, and let's say you've heard about a lot of the scandals that have happened, the Australian Royal Commission and things like that, or the United Nations and what happened for nearly a decade, where the Watchtower was an NGO in association with the United Nations, and you want to dig into this information. And let's say you find a book or a website that's written by an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and you want to make an informed decision to make sure that the claims that you've been hearing from these apostates is true or not. So So you say that people should be free to acquire knowledge so you can make an informed choice whether to be in the religion or to stay in the religion, but yet that's not really the case with Jehovah's Witnesses. They go on to say, Jehovah's Witnesses do not practice infant baptism and confer baptism only to a mature individual who has the capacity to understand his religious commitment. A person who qualifies for baptism as one of Jehovah's Witnesses is made fully aware that violating certain biblical standards without repentance may, in some cases, result in their expulsion or disassociation. Anyone who does not agree with these teachings can simply choose not to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, as if it's as simple as that. So in other words, you could be basically a child. You could be 10 or 11 years old and choose to get baptized. And okay, let's say you've been in the congregation your whole life, and let's say you've heard it spoken of from the platform that so-and-so is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they say that to the whole congregation. You've grown up and you've seen that, and you realize, well, if I get baptized and I leave this, that could happen to me. But have you really counted the cost of leaving this organization? If you are a 11 or a 12-year-old or even a teenager, do they really have the capacity to count the cost to where when they become 16, 17, or 18 years old, and they find out some of these scandals that really disturb them, and they end up getting disfellowshipped because they realize that, wow, this organization has some really, really bad scandals, and the elders didn't help me with that. And as far as I can tell from our research, that this organization is not a good organization, and from that point, you either disassociate yourself or you get disfellowshipped, right? For no longer trusting in the governing body, and you get shunned the rest of your life. Now, granted, if you're a teenager, your parents probably aren't going to kick you out of the house just yet, but let's just say you leave the house when you're 18 because it's not a healthy environment based on how your parents are maybe treating you. Maybe they're not shunning you yet, but you do know that at some point when you leave the house, they're probably going to shun you for the rest of your life. So how many people as a 12-year-old really counts the costs like that? When they become of age, right, at least 18, and they're of legal age to leave the home and whatnot, do they count the cost to know at that time they could be shunned by their friends and family the rest of their life? Do they really let that reality sink in? Or they think that can never happen to me, right? Jehovah's Witnesses do not automatically disfellowship someone who breaks the Bible's moral standards. Now, that's code for the Jehovah's Witnesses moral standards, right? They think those are interchangeable, regardless of the fact that even on these cases, the so-called Bible's moral standards, they've changed a number of times. What do they once say about organ transplants, right? What did they say about that? That it was cannibalism. Could you have been disfellowshipped for that? Or what about accepting blood fractions? The blood policies have changed a number of times. Those are all the so-called Bible's moral standards. And for disobeying those things that are okay now as a Jehovah's Witness, you could be disfellowshipped for those things. So again, the Bible's moral codes is essentially whatever the Watchtower deems a policy at the time. That's what that means. It could change. However, a baptized witness who makes a practice of doing so and is unwilling to change will be disfellowshipped. This practice is based on Bible principles. About to see that's not the case at all. When a person is disfellowshipped or chooses to disassociate himself, the elders will make a brief announcement at a religious service informing the congregation that this person, name of person, is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Nothing else is said. Nothing else is said. This next sentence is really important, so let me stop there. So, mistake number one is the elders make the announcement. But where do we see that in the scriptures as a policy? Where? Where is it said that the elders make this announcement? And then nothing else is said. And you're not even supposed to inquire. Your best friend of your entire life could be said that he's no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Someone who's been your best friend your entire life just got disfellowshipped, or could have even disassociated himself. You're not able to go to your friend and say, hey, friend? What happened? Can we talk about this? And can I find out what happened? Or can you even go to the elders and inquire and find out what happened? No, nothing else is said. Nothing else is said. You don't need to know. You're supposed to just take their word for it. You can't even inquire whether it was fair or not. Maybe it wasn't fair. Maybe there was a scandal involved and your friend is innocent. It doesn't matter. Look at this next part. Individual congregants will then decide, based on their personal religious conscience, whether to limit or cease their contact with the person, applying the principles contained in the Bible at 1 Corinthians 5 and 2 John 1. This part right here is dishonest to me. As if it's just every individual Jehovah's Witness is just applying their conscience, right? In some cases, they may cease contact, and in other times, they may not. It's up to their... No, this is not a conscience issue. The policy is very, very clear. That if someone is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, they get disfellowshipped, or if they disassociate with the organization, you are not supposed to have contact with them anymore. It's done. You're supposed to treat them basically like they're dead. So this is, I mean, I think they're saying this in this way to try to sound good in the courts, but no one should buy this. And I don't think that any legal person who actually spends 10 minutes researching this is going to buy this. You know, it's dishonest because I know that every Jehovah's Witness is going to say, oh yeah, my reason for shunning and all this is based on 1 Corinthians 5 and 2 John 1, and that's their religious conscience. But that's true. That's true. But the reality is you're doing this because of the policy. It's not simply a personal religious conscience. It's all based on policy in that you do whatever this religion tells you to do. Whatever the governing body says, whatever they put in print, that is what you do. That is what your conscience is. This whole issue here is not something you can disagree with and choose to still talk to your best friend and still be good friends with your best friend, right? If he's been disfellowshipped. You can't do that and be a faithful Jehovah's Witness. So we're not going to go over the scriptures here. Again, go to the video. I've talked about 1 Corinthians 5 a number of times. That is talking about someone who's already in the congregation. He's not yet been disfellowshipped, and you're not supposed to associate with someone like that because he should have been disfellowshipped. And then once he is disfellowshipped, then you could treat him like you would, like what Jesus says, a tax collector or a Gentile. And then 2 John 1, 9 through 11, it just amazes me because that's not talking about someone who has been disfellowshipped. Read the context. These paragraphs aren't numbered, but just so you know, I'm on page 5, about halfway down. They say, disfellowshipped and disassociated persons should understand that their former fellow believers may choose to adjust or cease their contact with them based on their conscience. That's just not true. It's just not true. I mean, try it. For example, the next time someone you know who gets disfellowshipped, go have lunch with them. Go have a couple of lunches with them. Go have some coffee with them. Hang out with them a couple of times. And then go talk to your elders. Be like, hey, I just hung out with so-and-so a couple of times. We had a really, really great time hanging out. I know he's no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but, we really had a good time together. What do you think about that? I mean, just try that on for size and see how that works with your elders. It is inaccurate to depict the practice of limiting contact with an expelled or disassociated person as unique to Jehovah's Witnesses. Changes in relationship. This is amazing. Changes in relationship based on choices that individuals make are commonplace in society. Oh, they're commonplace in society. Okay. For example, a husband might cheat on his wife and move in with another person. As a result, the betrayed wife might decide to have nothing more to do with him. His children and other family members might also decide to have nothing more to do with him. Could the unrepentant husband expect to have the same relationship with his wife and family that existed before his infidelity? Obviously not. The same phenomena. This is their words. The same phenomena exists in many other spheres. For instance, when someone changes his political affiliations or ideology. I mean, do you see what's going on here? They say that this is not unique to Jehovah's Witnesses. And you're thinking, oh, and it's commonplace, in fact. Really? So they say it's commonplace for this kind of thing to happen. But what they're talking about here is a policy. Is there a commonplace policy? Because that's what we're talking about here. This is Jehovah's Witness policy to shun someone who leaves this religion or is excommunicated from this religion. It's a policy, written, clear writing, clear as day, and you're all to follow it without deviating. Or you yourself could, in fact, be disfellowshipped. This is a policy. So are policies like this commonplace in society? Not that I know of. Not commonplace where I'm from. How about you? But it's amazing here. They compare this to a husband committing adultery and the wife having nothing more to do with him. That's the parallel. Something is terrible. Is someone destroying their family by cheating, by committing adultery. That's the comparison they're making, as if that's something even similar to a Jehovah's Witness saying, you know what, I just don't think the governing body is who they claim to be. I don't think I can follow this religion anymore. I still love Jesus Christ. I still love Jehovah, but I cannot follow this organization any longer. Is that the same thing, or even a parallel? Is a husband cheating on his wife and destroying his family willingly? Is that the same thing as someone having a different religious viewpoint? I mean, they even compare it to changing your political affiliation or ideology. How many people do you know that have a policy in place to where if you are a Democrat and you become a Republican, that you get shunned the rest of your life? I mean, I know people get upset about that. But shunning? I can't say I've ever seen that before. Or a different ideology? Okay. I just really feel like this whole paragraph would get laughed out of court. I mean, it's just laughably bad. Really, really bad argument here. Continuing on, skipping this next paragraph, still on page 5 though. Disfellowshipped and disassociated individuals are free to attend our religious services, share in singing religious songs during the services, receive our religious publications, and receive spiritual assistance from congregation elders. The person is not abandoned or considered an apostate as some claimed. Really? Really? They are welcomed and encouraged to return to the congregation at any time. Instead, if a person demonstrates repentance, he may request to be reinstated as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. This is based on the witness's understanding of 2 Corinthians 2, 6-8, which commands congregants to kindly forgive and comfort the expelled person to confirm their love for him. What's missing here? Well, what's missing here is that when this person, they may be free to come in and join in, but they're supposed to sit in the back and continue to get shunned, and no one is supposed to speak with them or even look at them. This person could be on the back row crying, and no one is supposed to comfort them or even look at them. You see what's missing here? This article or this manual is so dishonest. Honestly, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. And also, as far as being welcomed back, this person could come into the congregation after being disfellowshipped for a year and come in crying in repentance that he's sorry for what he did, whatever that may be. No mercy. No mercy. Still supposed to shun him. It's going to be a time, it could be weeks and months, that person coming in, crying in repentance, treated like he's dead. There's no mercy here. There's no mercy here. They're just not painting an accurate picture of what really happens. We'll keep going. One thing I want to point out is they cite here scholar Massimo Introvigne, probably not pronouncing that right, founder and managing director of the Center for Studies on New Religion. I would encourage you to do your own study on this man. I'm not going to do that here, but I'd encourage you to do your own study of this man, and also do your own study on jw.org and see how many times they cite this man's work. So do that. Let me know what you find. You might be surprised. Okay. Now the next part is an actual publication. It looks like a pamphlet with pictures and everything. So I'm really curious as to what this is going to look like. If this is something that they're going to be printing out and distributing at a court to legal experts, or I really, really want to know, maybe if you know something about this, where this is really going to be used, specifically. I really want to know. But this brochure is really, really bad. It's terrible. So let's go through a couple of highlights here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, just some highlights. Okay, so here they talk about inactive and disassociated ones. The term disassociation applies to the action taken by a person who is a baptized witness but deliberately repudiates his Christian standing by indicating either orally or in writing that he no longer wants to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, just so you know, right, you could still be a follower of Jesus Christ and love Jehovah and follow them wholeheartedly, but if you're not part of this religion, you have repudiated your Christian standing and committed apostasy. If you said, I don't believe this governing body anymore, I still love Jesus, I love Jehovah. In fact, I even believe in most of the teachings of this religion, but I don't think this governing body is who they claim to be. And I think they've been involved in some scandals to where I cannot in good conscience follow their teaching and leadership anymore. That is an act of apostasy, according to Jehovah's Witnesses. So don't let this language fool you, and I think it can really fool people who aren't really familiar with this religion, because if somebody says, I'm deliberately repudiating my Christian standing, well, if you say that to any person on the street, you're going to be like, oh, well, that person's no longer a Christian. He's no longer following Jesus Christ. When that may not be the case at all. Right? It may not be the case at all. He may just not be following the governing body anymore. But they're one and the same when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, now there's a section on shunning here. A principal aim of disciplining and shunning is to bring a wrongdoer to his senses. Let me read that again. The principal aim of disciplining and shunning is to bring a wrongdoer to his senses. Now, please tell me, if you're a faithful Jehovah's Witness, where does the Bible say that shunning is to bring someone to their senses? Show me the scripture that says that is the purpose of shunning. Now, the first problem is you're not going to find anything about actual shunning as far as shunning someone who has been disfellowshipped. The only shunning that actually happens is the example of 1 Corinthians chapter 5, to where you're not associating with this person who's committed these wicked sins. These wicked sins. But the reason you're not supposed to associate with that person is because they should not have been in the congregation in the first place. They left him there, even though he had committed these gross immoral acts. He should have been excommunicated. Okay? So that's the only example of actual shunning, at least in the Christian scriptures, for someone who should have been disfellowshipped. There's no post-disfellowshipping or excommunication shunning in the scriptures. It's just not there. All in the congregation show principal love by avoiding contact and conversation with the disfellowshipped person. Again, nothing in the scripture says that. What did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 18? Treat them like a Gentile or tax collector in terms of how the Jews did that. Right? And especially after the day of Pentecost, right? How did the Christians begin to view the Jew and the tax collectors? Well, they were sinners in need of salvation, and they presented the gospel to them. That's what happened. So that is how you should treat someone who's no longer the same religion as you, is to share with them the truth. All right, we're on page 9 now. Family ties remain. Now, the citing here of the April 15th, 1988, by its behavior, a disfellowshipped person often causes suffering to witness family members. Suffering. What kind of suffering? At any rate, for what concerns life within the immediate family circle, normal family affections and dealings can continue. Since being disfellowshipped does not end their blood ties or marriage relationship. Interesting. So they've made an exception here. Do you see an exception in the Bible? Now, either you need to buy into this thing or you don't. Right? Why are there loopholes here? And that's the problem, because they're making doctrine up. When you make up doctrine like this, it's not based on the scriptures, you're going to be kind of forced into loopholes like this. This is a loophole. And they can't cite a Bible verse about this. Secondly, you can be disfellowshipped, but if you're still within blood ties, you can continue the relation. No, there's nothing in the Bible about that. They have to make this stuff up. If a disfellowshipped parent falls sick or is no longer able to take care of himself financially or physically, witness children would have the scriptural and moral duty to assist him. Likewise, in case a disfellowshipped child feels unwell physically or emotionally, witness parents would take care of him. Very interesting here. So the first thing is about children taking care of their parents. Now, it's really disingenuous thing to say. It's the wrong thing to say based on what the Watchtower says about higher education. Because they say almost all negative things about higher education, or about doing things that can make you more well-equipped financially to take care of yourself and to take care of your families. A lot of that extra education is looked down upon in this organization, yet you have a scriptural or moral duty to assist him if somebody's sick or not able to take care of themselves. But if you subjected yourself to janitorial work and doing the bare minimum so you could pioneer more, how is that the responsible thing to do if you have parents that you'll need to take care of someday? But you did all that in service of the organization because they told you that, be careful, be wary of higher education, right? It's always looked down upon, almost always, like 99.99% of the time, higher education is looked down upon. Now, it's interesting here, they talk about the witness parents taking care of a disfellowshipped child. But you've seen the videos. You've seen the videos to where a disfellowshipped child, they leave the home, they go out on their own, the family is just so sad, they're down, their child's left, and you see this. These are really just the stories, the little videos they do, to where they're just they're doing acting and whatnot. So you see this example where mom's in the kitchen, she's thinking about she wants to call her child, she misses her child, but she resists the urge to do so. And then one day she actually gets a phone call from her child, and she sees in the caller ID her child is calling, but she hits send to voicemail or end call, and she ignores them. She ignores them. What if that child, and the Watchtower says that's what you should do. You should ignore their calls. That's what they show in these videos. Ignore the calls. Ignore the calls. What if your child is in trouble? They're sick or they're in some kind of trouble. You would have ignored them in those cases, right? You would have ignored them. So a very, very disingenuous thing to say. Okay, let's go through some of these expert observations. They say, this one professor here says, it is worth noting that disfellowshipping does not cancel family relations, as some dishonest journalists and cult experts sometimes try to claim. Who's claiming that? Cite a source. Who's saying that? Obviously, if they're a minor, it doesn't cancel it out. But most of the critics aren't even, this is really a straw man. Most of the critics I know are not arguing that it cancels the family relations. If the person is already out of the home, yeah, it does cancel the family relations. It sure does. Here's another one here. It is not the place of the government to intervene in the choices that consenting adults make. And the reality is that many religions do have the standard of no longer maintaining strong ties with people who have left their faith tradition. Some former members have chosen to monetize their status as former members, and it is entirely reasonable for the Jehovah's Witnesses, like any other faith tradition in that situation, to want to have no contact with these people who are basically professional critics of the religion. I'd like to read actually the full quote here. So many religions have the standard. Give us some examples here. I don't know if many religions who do this. I know a lot in Islam do that, but many religions? Really? But I thought this other part was interesting about those who monetize their status as former members and people having no contact with them. So I know there are, of course, like ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Lloyd Evans would be probably one of the more famous ones who do that. They have a monetized channel and whatnot, but are they really just out to get? The picture they're painting here is these ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are out there just out to get them. But is that always the case? Or a lot of them there because they want information to be exposed. They want transparency. They want people to know what's going on in this religion, things that this religion will not tell you about. Another one says gratitude for the arrangement. So this is the testimony of one of Jehovah's Witnesses named Jasmine. During the time I was disfellowshipped, I had limited contact with my family and friends in the congregation. Still, I knew that they loved me very much and that they did not condemn me. Really? I knew that they were limiting their association out of respect for the Bible commandments that we had each chosen to live our lives by. When I put my life back in order, I was warmly welcomed back by the congregation. So translation here, putting your life back in order means waiting the weeks or months to get for the elders to finally approve and give the green light. Hey, you walk and now talk to this person. It's treating you like children is really what it is. It's treating you like children that the elders have to give this green light. They decide when you've put your life back in order. You don't decide that. The elders decide that after weeks or months. Yeah, it says they did not condemn you, yet they shunned you. Really. Very, very disingenuous. Okay, so we have a little bit more to do. I don't think I can go through too much more of this. I'll try to go a little bit quicker. So some of the definitions here. Let's do disassociation. The term disassociation applies to the action taken by a person who is a baptized witness but deliberately repudiates his Christian standing. This was quoted earlier, but there's more here. By stating that he no longer wants to be recognized or known as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or he might renounce his place in the Christian congregation by his actions, such as becoming part of a secular organization that has objectives contrary to Bible teachings, and therefore is under the judgment by Jehovah God. Such a person is treated in the same way as a disfellowshipped person. Now, this could also mean going to another religion, which is what they say next. Say, for example, he might join another religion and make known his intention to remain a part of it. Notice here they cite 1 John 2:19. Let's look at that. It says, they went out from us, but they were not really of us. For if they were of us, they would have remained with us. But they went out so that it would be manifest that they all are not of us. What is this talking about? This is talking about the Antichrist. And who are the Antichrists? Are those who denied that Jesus has come in the flesh. This has a context, okay? This has a context. The elders are not authorized to coerce or pressure someone to remain as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Each person must make his own choice regarding religion. We believe that those who worship God must do so willingly from the heart. Yet you hold this over their head like they're being held hostage, that if you leave this religion, everyone you know and love is going to shun you for the rest of your life. And that could happen if you say, I'm leaving. You could have someone who said, I want to stay in this religion. I just don't believe that this governing body is who they claim to be. I want to stay here and continue worshiping Jehovah with you all. I just don't believe this governing body. If you do that and you believe that, you're going to get disfellowshipped and shunned the rest of your life. And that's held over your head. So the way they're describing these things is so disingenuous, not telling you the full story. Now this part's interesting. We're talking about inactivity. We're on page 11, by the way. What if a person no longer preaches or attends your meetings? Do you view that person as having resigned? No, we do not. Resigning or disassociating oneself is different from becoming weak in faith. So if someone's no longer preaching or attending your meetings, they're weak in faith. Often, those who for a time slow down or stop in their worship have not abandoned their faith, but are suffering from discouragement. That's often the case. Rather than shunning such one. Now, there's a thing called soft shunning. It's not written in the policy. But if you have any stories or examples of soft shunning, please share these with us. Because I think a lot of faithful Jehovah's Witnesses are going to deny that happens. But I know it happens. I've heard so many testimonies about soft shunning. It happens all the time. Rather than shunning such ones, we try to give them consolation and support. If the person wants help, congregation elders take the lead in providing spiritual assistance. It's always in the elders' hands who do this. It's not up to you. It's for the elders. That's what's really wrong with this arrangement. It doesn't have to be that way. You, as a Christian, you are empowered and you have the freedom and liberty to be the one a struggling brother or sister comes to when they need help. They do not have an obligation to go to the elders. There's no scriptural obligation for you to go to the elders. The elders are simply there to oversee the congregation. They're to be shepherds, shepherding the flock. All right, now we have the view of Jehovah's Witnesses. This is on page 12, and I think this is the last page that we'll go over. And this is the first time they talk about Matthew 18, but look at what they say about it. As early as 1904, in the book, The New Creation, attention was given to the need to take appropriate action so as not to allow a demoralizing of the congregation. The understanding that the Bible students then had of the procedure for dealing with wrongdoers as outlined in Matthew 18:15 through 17 was discussed. In harmony with this, there were on rare occasions church trials, in which the evidence of wrongdoing in serious cases was presented to the entire congregation. In other words, back in those early days, they were actually doing what Jesus said and bringing this before the church. I can't believe they actually put this in print and that people don't see this. It's in the Proclaimer's book, by the way. That's what they're quoting from. How can a faithful Jehovah's Witness see this and be like, whoa, look at this. It looks like back then they were doing what Jesus said, and I've never seen this happen today. Then they go on to say, years later, the Watchtower, in its May 15th, 1944, reviewed the matter in light of the entire Bible, and showed that such matters affecting the congregation should be handled by responsible brothers charged with the congregation oversight. In other words, what they're saying here, I don't know how else to read this. They're saying they used to follow Jesus, and then they abandoned the teaching of Jesus to do the unscriptural practices of having judicial committees and the elders involved, which 1 Corinthians 5 doesn't teach that. And if you go to the account in Deuteronomy, this is a totally different thing. Read the context of Deuteronomy chapter 21. Read this text, right? Read it. Is that the policy you really want to abide by? I mean, read that carefully. Look at what it actually says. And do you want that policy implemented? Do you really want that? I don't think you really do. So in other words, they abandoned Jesus to implement a policy from Deuteronomy? Then they say that was followed, the Watchtower of March 1st, 1952, with articles that emphasize not only proper procedure, but the need to take action to keep the organization clean. Repeatedly since then, the subject has been given consideration, but the objectives have always remained the same: to keep the congregation clean, and 2, to impress on the wrongdoer the need for sincere repentance, with a view to recovering him. Amazing. Then they say, 2 factors which must coincide result in the disfellowshipping of one of Jehovah's Witnesses. First, a baptized witness commits a serious sin. Second, he does not repent of his sin. Now, serious sin can mean a lot of things for a Jehovah's Witness. One thing it could mean is that you're smoking, and you've got a habit of smoking. That's a serious sin where you can be shunned for the rest of your life. Even if you've experienced the most tragic of events, and the only thing that you could find to do to cope with that was to smoke, you could be disfellowshipped for that, shown no mercy. But it could also be that you're doubting some of the organization's main teachings, and you can get disfellowshipped and shunned the rest of your life. And that's again where this article, this manual here, is disingenuous. In fact, probably dishonest, because they don't mention that here. And so if you present this to court, people are going to be under the impression that, oh, they only do this to people who are committing adultery and doing really bad things. Well, no, that's not the case. You can just doubt one teaching of this religion and be disfellowshipped for it. That can happen. I know people that's happened to. Point 2, procedures for disfellowshipping. Some serious offenses such as sexual immorality, adultery, homosexuality, blasphemy, apostasy, idolatry, and similar gross sins require more than forgiveness from an offended individual. Because the spiritual and moral cleanness of the congregation are threatened, such serious sins must be reported to the elders and handled by them. Neither one of these scriptures actually say that. I mean, how many legal persons are going to read this? And they're going to actually look up these scriptures for themselves. No, they're probably going to read this and say, oh, well, they're citing Bible verses for this, that then their beliefs are scriptural. How many people are going to actually dig into this and see that these texts are not talking about that, reporting serious sins to the elders? So we're going to wrap it up there. There's comments by academics. I did notice this whole manual is very academic. They cite their sources and whatnot. I wonder how many of these sources are cited accurately, but they cite sources very different from regular Watchtower literature available to the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses. So they really don't cite their sources properly. So again, there's a whole lot here. I bet there's a lot here that I could have pointed out. But if you notice something that you think is noteworthy, please contact me. I would really be interested in hearing it. And again, if you want this manual for yourself, just Google this. You can probably find it pretty easily. But if you can't find it, just send me a message and I can provide this to you. So if you have any thoughts and you want to leave this publicly, please do that. I love hearing from all of you. What do you think about this whole manual? What do you think about it? Beyond that, if you want to contact me privately, go down to the show notes or the description. Whether it's to get a copy of this or just to talk to me, I'm happy to hear from any of you privately. We can talk via email, WhatsApp, on the phone. Any of that is totally okay with me. If you want to support this work, especially if you're watching this on YouTube, please consider subscribing to this channel, hitting the notification bell so you can be notified when I post new content, which is typically weekly, and then hitting the thumbs up icon. That really helps with the algorithm and getting this content recognized. Beyond that, please consider sharing this material with someone who needs to hear it, especially sharing this manual with your Jehovah's Witnesses friends and family, and asking them, what do you think about this manual that I found? Now, obviously, you've got to be very careful and strategic in terms of how you do that, but nonetheless, I think it's really important that Jehovah's Witnesses know about this information, so please consider sharing this video, this podcast with those. Another way you can support this is by becoming a monthly supporter through Patreon. You can go down to the show notes or description, and there's a way for you to do that there. Every little bit helps. It helps me to keep the lights on and keep up with the technology improvements that need to be made. So thank you everyone who supports this in every way possible. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great week, and we will see you next week. For more information about Jehovah's Witnesses and other topics, please visit michaeljfelker.com. There you can also reach me directly to submit questions or comments to be covered on the JW Review. To subscribe to this podcast, please go to iTunes and search for the JW Review.